So we're talking about emotions, how to free yourself from yourself, navigating some of those challenging things that come up, really just opening up a conversation for that. But I think it'd be great to start with like what are emotions and kind of give that like meta view. So if you just want to give like a little background on your take there.
Yeah, well, I think, emotions are a part of being human. And the reason that I love even talking or thinking about emotions is because it's something that all humans experience. It's not regional, it's not, it's a human part no matter where you're living in the world or what age you are or what the color of your skin is. Like it's, your sexual orientation, these are universal concepts. And so it's important for us to educate ourselves about emotions because for something that's so inherently part of all of us, it's something that we're not really well versed in discussing. And so my favorite definition of emotions are energy in motion,
Mm,
meaning that energy that comes into us that we experience, and it's not conscious, it's not by choice, and whether those feel good or not so good may be part of the way we experience them and the constructs and design of our thoughts around those experiences, and denying the fact that they're just real. There's nothing we can necessarily do to control what feelings come in, what emotions come in, because they are energy in motion.
I love that. And it's like every human, as long as you're human, you have emotions, right? If you're well and you're um experiencing life, like there are going to be emotions that come up for you, and you don't have control over emotions necessarily, but you do have control over how you respond to them. So we'll get into that a little bit more. And I think, like the stimulus and the response, like that's your choice, that's your opportunity. And oftentimes, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of us were raised with like emotions are not good. Or only select emotions are good and enjoyable and welcome, and other emotions, negative emotions, are not welcome. And something that I think is really interesting is, what we deem acceptable and non-acceptable, and also like how that resistance works with persistence with challenging emotions. And I know we want to get further into that in just a bit. Um, but I wonder, like, what are your thoughts on what's most important to differentiate between like emotions and moods?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite distinctions because I've really not only been kind of curious about this my whole adult life, but really even in this past year and a half of having more time to really observe myself in solitude and observe my emotions and feelings and moods. I've kind of done a lot of studying about this, and so as I mentioned, emotions are energy in motion, and we process them or experience them through that filter that you described of our conditioning and what we were led to believe was okay or not okay to feel. Moods
Hmm.
moods tend to and emotions tend to be fairly brief if they're left on their own. People who study them talk about them being lasting only 90 seconds, this sort of energetic happening, positive or negative, that just kind of warms us or moves through us like a weather system. And left on their own, they will pass. Moods tend to be more permeating and maybe less related to an actual stimulus, but I think of them almost more in the body, like pre-existing to some sort of energy coming in and out. Maybe it's hormonal, or maybe there's something less tangible about it, but moods tend to come on without provocation, or maybe an incident happened and it's still lingering, but maybe we can't put our finger on it so much, right? Like you'll just wake up, at least for me, I will wake up maybe in an anxious mood or just in an off mood, a negative state of being, or maybe a positive state of being that just sort of seems to color the world around me, and make me see and perceive what looked one way yesterday now looks different. And it
Mm.
has to do with, I mean, I'm sure that there are I know there are neural reasons why we are and experience moods, but I do think about them more in a physiological state. And again, whether it's hormonal or whether it is related to other biochemistry, it seems more out of our control.
That's amazing. And like, so for people who are here, I just want to like recap kind of where we've been so far. The distinction between emotions and moods. So emotions being like things of sadness, anger, maybe confusion, surprise, disgust. And oftentimes emotions really only last about 90 seconds, whereas a mood might be something that can last a few days and maybe um, has like a deeper connection to the body or experiences, kind of the circumstances of your life and your being, like your wellness. Am I getting that right?
Well, I mean, we're just
We're just
hypothesizing. Yes,
starting.
but
Yeah.
I love the way that, I mean, that's the way that I've been educated to believe, and really more based on kind of assessing myself, like evaluating myself and noticing my own tendencies. You know, I'm at menopause now, and I'm you know, that perimenopausal period, and so I just noticed that my moods are playing a much bigger role in sort of my day-to-day life. And I'm not, my life isn't changing day to day as much as it used to, nearly not as much when my kids were little or when I was busier with work. But I do notice that I just have these random days where I'm just feeling off. And maybe, and I'm
Mm,
not saying we don't impact our moods or that we can't impact our moods. We can with practice and with processing and consciousness, the same way we do with moods, I mean, with emotions. But I do feel like they're more sort of low grade, less intense, and kind of more persistent
mm,
than emotions can be.
mm-hmm. And I know we want to get into like examples and practices. And something I'm curious about is, you said you've started to notice different moods. Like, what is your process? Like, how do you notice your mood? Because I think a lot of times people are so, if you're really busy, if you're very focused on something, you can be out of touch with yourself and out of touch with your feelings and you might feel your mood a little bit more, but what is your thought process on like how to observe yourself?
Well, for me, there's always, it takes a little while to recognize what's going on. But I usually, you know, if something lasts longer for me than a few minutes, then and it starts to permeate, um, kind of just my filter. If I talk about sort of like wearing a negative filter or looking through a negative filter, kind of that glass half full mentality, and I recognize that as being in contrast to the way that I typically am. I'm typically pretty upbeat or optimistic. At least I'd like to be. And so, yeah, the thing I try to do is just name that and be aware of it. You know, whether it's an
Mm-hmm.
emotion or a mood, to recognize it and recognize, and sometimes it's based on how I'm received by others, but a lot of times I'm in conversation with myself, and I notice that conversation is either negative or positive. And I notice it in the energy that I feel in my body, like sort of that vitality pulsing through our veins. It's either live enlivening and I have a good energy, or it's I have low energy and low pleasantness, and I'm feeling like either that, if that's transient, I let it go and I know it'll burn itself out. But if it's lasting longer, then I'm aware of like, well, what's this coming from, and what can I do? What's the kindest, most loving way I can respond to myself? This is when I'm really doing a good job. I don't always do
Yeah.
this good of a job, but these are my goals.
Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing there is like curiosity and observation, right? Like observing how you're feeling and not like attaching to it. Like that's something that comes up for me is I think there's a concept a friend of mine shared with me, and I think it's in dialectical behavioral therapy, this concept of like going down the emotional well. So what I see that as is, let's say I wake up and I'm feeling funky. I'm like in a mood. I don't necessarily have a strong emotion. There's just like an air of heaviness, maybe a lack of motivation for the day. And if I judge that and attach to it, I can start going down this well, which, I start to think of every other crappy thing in my life. And it's like each one of those things is a rock. And I'm like holding all of these rocks, and then I'm sinking and I'm sinking and I'm sinking because I'm thinking about all of these things that are pulling me down. So then I'm at the bottom of the well looking up, being like, shit, and it's like, first of all, you got to let go of all of those rocks to make it a little bit easier to climb out. But this concept of like not going down the well, so the the component of observation, right? Like seeing where you are and just like acknowledging it and being with it from a place of like curiosity. Like, oh, I see that I'm feeling some sadness and some heaviness. Like, what might that be from? What might be soothing? What might be helpful? Bringing in that element of like curiosity, love, and compassion with yourself rather than attaching to it and letting it take over and like submerge you down the well. So I find that super helpful when I notice it coming up. I'm like, okay, cool, it's here. I'll be with it for a minute. I like to say, like, get curious for like 30 seconds, like, just ask questions to myself for 30 seconds rather than like, oh, it's here, it's taking over, like it's kind of like if somebody knocks at your door, like you don't have to let them in, right? You have the opportunity to be like, hey, what's up? Like, what are you here to do? Ah, do you want to buy these this set of knives? No, I don't want to buy this set of knives. Okay, cool. Have a good day. Bye. Like, you know, give your
Right. Well, I mean, I love being with you, Katie, because you're not so in your beliefs are not so embedded in you, and you're still very open, and you are naturally very curious and able to really form your own ideas and your own experiences and be that. And I think what for my generation, and there was so much what I there's another concept in studying emotion, which is meta emotion, which is how we feel about our feelings. And so what you're describing here is a much kinder, loving, more curious, open response to any feeling you're having, as opposed to the negative meta emotion, having negative feelings about our feelings. And then that's what keeps us in the well and trapped. Because certainly in in my upbringing, there were certain, and for all of us in our upbringing, certain cultural ideals that were set in place by our families and our caregivers and teachers and peers, that of what was okay to express and what wasn't. If you watch a toddler, how their moods shift, it's not even moods, how their emotions are completely 1 minute to the next, from, tantrum to laughter to,
mm-hmm.
just unbridled joy. It's very, very fluid, and that's really informative, because that's our natural state, that's our essence. And it's only when we have this society writing on top of, like, a blank slate of writing graffiti of saying that's okay, that's not okay, it's okay to behave this way in this concept, this is definitely never okay, don't ever do that. And so that forms this judgments we have and shapes this meta emotion, which has to do with how we feel about our feelings, which interrupts their normal way of being. And so what you're doing is talking about intercepting before we get into that, even having feelings about our feelings, and stopping it at the gate and saying, hey, I'm noticing something here, and not forming or buying into that default setting that may have become automated for part of the way that you were raised, or what you've been conditioned to believe is okay and not okay to feel or express.
100%. And I'll say, like, this is a new practice, right? And it's a practice. It's not something it's something I've chosen. Like, I am still human. I still have sadness and anger and depression and like all of that anxiety. And my practice is to start to interrupt that, right? So instead of going down that well and letting it take over, being like, okay, this is here. Let's like check in as to why and see if we can just like listen, because I believe our emotions are wise. And when we pause and ask them questions and get curious, we have the opportunity to like to learn, so we can maybe shift our behaviors in the future, and that will help to shift um, our moods and our emotions too. And I feel like I had something I wanted to share with that, but I forget. But I do want to say if you're here and you have any questions, please send that in through the chat. Like we'd love to um, go into any specific things you're curious about.
Yeah, and back to what you were just saying too, Katie, about I think there's a lot of discussion in the world around feelings of what comes first, our thoughts or our feelings. There's a
Feelings,
there are
I think.
different yeah there are different schools of thought about this though.
Hmm.
Not to speak about thought in the diet definition, but yes, you mentioned a moment ago about emotions are so important for delivering information, and in delivering important information, and go back to being really a protective safety mechanism. They're there for a purpose. They're there to inform us about our environment, if we're safe, if we're not safe. And while we may be, if you're fortunate to be in a physically safe place, um, a lot of your basic needs being met, then you're able, some of these primitive ways of responding for safety may be met, but they're still there serving, being active, trying to do a good job for us to keep us safe and protect us, even from silly things like, in the grand scheme of things, like disappointment or frustration, some of those negative emotions that we don't want to feel, that are part of being human. And so it is our judgment around those. And you nodded when I said about the debate of thoughts versus feelings, which comes first. There's a lot of, like, cognitive behavioral therapy is really targeted on shaping, the belief that there's a neutral circumstance or situation, and then we have our thoughts about that, and then we have our feelings about that, and then if we change our thoughts, then we can change our feelings, and we can change our lived experience. And a lot of that is true. I mean, that's a great way to regulate our emotions and do what we're talking about overall, which is how do we feel and how do we want to feel, and is life half negative, half positive, which I know we had talked about the other day, and we can get into that. But we do have some choice in how we shape the way we want to feel. And I do believe, like you do, that feelings come first, that there are unconscious things that our body recognizes in the world around us as being okay or not okay, that may not be conscious, but that we process in ways that we're not even aware of feeling relaxed, at ease, comfortable, able to breathe normally, or maybe learn and be curious and be open. And then there's times when we're truly emotionally hijacked, that may be influenced by our general mood and outlook. But that's where the work comes in, is to kind of be able to do the things you're talking about, practicing noticing when we're not so hijacked, so that when we are hijacked, we have some skills to fall back on.
Yeah, and like I'm sitting here thinking, I think like your emotions are things you can't control, right? They come up. But I also believe your thoughts and your emotions are always like they're in a relationship, and like you can't choose your emotions, but you can choose your thoughts about your emotions, which changes your experience of your emotions. So let's say, as I was mentioning before, right? Like, say I'm feeling sadness and I don't love feeling sad because maybe I feel like low energy when I feel sad. And if I'm like, oh no, sadness is here, this sucks, this is so annoying, I hate this, sadness to me in my experience has magnified, right? When I'm like, oh, sadness is here. Okay, like, what do we want to do about it? Like, can we just be with it? And maybe like I have an evening of sadness. And, when I'm able to be with it, I've noticed like the next morning I wake up, I feel good, I feel clear. And I also think like that's related to your behaviors, right? So thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all connected. They're all in relationship. And I noticed, I made a really big decision yesterday and I was thinking I might wake up today feeling scared or shitty or whatever. I took a yoga class last night and I did a kirtan, like a singing, chanting class. And I really believe that influenced the way I feel, my being, my essence, like my mind, my body. and my spirit feel influenced by the energy I was around, the love, the community. Like there's something about expressing and singing and being creative, and also just moving the energy in your body. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that because I was so expecting to not feel good this morning, and I felt like, wow, I feel pretty clear. I feel pretty good. It's cool. We'll run with that.
Well, I'm really happy for you, first of all, that you had that experience, and that you recognized it as a surprise and as a possibility for you, even if it hadn't been what you were anticipating. And that really speaks to the fact that that it is energy in our bodies, and that emotions are stored in our bodies. And this is, we know from books like Bessel van der Kolk, the body, um, where is it
The
here? I've
body
got it.
keeps the score.
The body keeps the
Yeah.
score. And then Gabor Mate, when the body says no. I mean, we know
Mm.
that the emotions don't just go away. I mean, unexpressed or repressed emotions don't go away, that they stay in our bodies. And so,
What happens? Tell us.
well, we have the choice. When you're talking about, like, some people are raised like, I can't feel this, it's not safe, I don't like the way it feels. And that's where we have the thought about, is this emotion positive or negative? If it's positive, which our culture massively reinforces as being great, everyone wants to be around the happy people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not
Mm-hmm.
happy, there must be something wrong with you. And that's a real American way of being, and a very much in our century. And we've known a lot of heartbreak this past year because people weren't really prepared to deal with some of the things that came up for them: the sadness, the disappointment, the frustration, the alienation, the anxiety, uncertainty, just all of that. People felt really inept to cope with that. And so when we don't have conversations with ourselves and allow these things that we're feeling of no choice, when we don't allow ourselves to express them, they don't go away, and they become stuck in our bodies. And this is something, as a physician, that I know, because I experienced this myself, and I also saw it a lot just in people that that I interacted with as patients. That all this unexpressed emotion can really, we know that it leads to inflammation in the body, high cortisol levels, tension, tension myositis, lactic acid. How often do we know of the person who, getting ready to move the next day, throws their back out, or suddenly
Mm-hmm.
develops this incapacitating pain in their neck? And there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
emotion that shows up in our body as physical pain. And it's not imaginary, and it's not this whole mind over matter. But we know that our bodies respond, like our brains tell our bodies to brace for change, to brace for danger. There's a tiger coming. There may be a need to act quickly here. Those are all natural responses. And it's only when we deny them or pretend they're not there that they do get stuck. And we can stockpile. You may be trying to cope with something in your life that's difficult by avoiding it, or pretending it's not there, or shaming and blaming someone else. But what ends up happening is, if it's not being expressed in its true form and gets stockpiled, the body will eventually say enough. The body never lies. So what will
Mm-hmm.
happen is, you may suddenly be found with, you're either depressed and emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted, or develop some sort of ailment that may even defy medical understanding, that you go to see all these experts on and nobody knows what's wrong, or all your studies come back normal. And there are times even when your studies don't come back normal, because holding that kind of repressed energy affects us on a cellular level. I mean, now they even know that the fascia, like the membrane, the thin membrane that surrounds all of our organs and our muscles, and inside, like the peritoneal cavity, like all of our organs are surrounded by these membranes that we used to think were just neutral, just like, collagen fibers or fibroblasts. But they're not. They all are communicating, and they're communicating on a cellular level, through, processes that we won't get into today. But they're energy, and there are places where that's allowed to flow, and there's places where it's not allowed to flow, and where things get turned
Mm.
on a cellular level, and things get turned off on a cellular level that protect us. And so it's not to be minimized.
For sure. And I think this speaks so much to going back to like emotions being energy in motion. When you're noticing unexplained pain in your body or inflammation or injury, I believe there's something to do with emotions there, right? So there's like and you said something around like not allowing, right? When you have like a blockage or you feel stuck, like there might be an association between that area in your body and emotions that are not being expressed. So I think practically speaking, it's really important to have a energy outlet, an energetic outlet, whether it's through your mind, your body, singing, music. Like that's what I'm getting from this, and that's what I've seen in my own life is, think about it. When you're sitting home and you're not moving, you're not getting out, you can feel really heavy, right? Really stuck. And that's I think of it from an energetic perspective. So having outlets, having people you can surround yourself with, getting in your body, the fascia, foam rolling, stretching, massage, right? There's so many things that release hormones and allow that energy to move and release in your body rather than being stored as emotions or, like that pain.
Yeah, well, remember, Katie, to about a year ago, you had started doing, these online ecstatic dance experiences, which I had no experience with prior to working with you, and it was really powerfully transformative because I didn't realize, sitting at my desk, kind of being mentally distracted, I didn't realize how much was going on inside my body. And when we did those experiences, and for those who are watching, like in what we did is we met by Zoom, and Katie had playlists that she had assembled, and they were some songs I was familiar with, some songs I wasn't familiar with, but it didn't matter because it was just a calling to move your body to whatever was called for, with no instructor, no guidance in the sense of following like an aerobics class or some kind of choreography. it was it was just what you're called to do. What is your body calling for you to do? And it was so meaningful for me I mean, it was actually not even meaningful. It was therapeutic for me because I would go to those ecstatic dance experiences and feel that shift. And I would end that time feeling lighter, more at ease. And we ended with a meditation as well, remember? And just a really guided, soothing, comforting. And that was where the community really helped because sometimes not all of us were on screen doing the ecstatic dance. Some people felt self-conscious and were encouraged to just move however they wanted, wherever they wanted, on or off camera. But then at the end, we would convene in that meditation that you led, and that would feel very community oriented, that we were all together experiencing that. And even though we were isolated in our homes, I felt very much a part of that common humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like that connection in maybe a novel way, but the acceptance and the invitation of community can also really like allow us to open our energy because I don't know, I think there's something in being surrounded by others that gives a deeper level of invitation, joy, especially in dance. I think there's like a shared energy and there's more curiosity and there's other people's energy to bounce off of. And I think dance is a really great way to feel into your body. And this is not like dance, it doesn't matter what you look like. But I think of ecstatic dance and getting into your body just as like feeling what's here, like can I just feel this area of my body and notice it and see, does it feel good? Does it feel soothing? Does it not feel good? Oh, how does the other side feel in contrast to this? So it's really that opportunity to practice in your body, curiosity and openness and getting to know. And I have a belief that what we do in our body is what we do in our mind. So the body can lead and the mind can follow. So when you hear people talking about like power posing, right? So like we power pose, you look at yourself in the mirror and you're just like feeling it. That is a really great way to start embodying that mindset. And personally, for me, going through a lot of talk therapy and things of that it never could quite get to that like deeper level for me. And it was only when I started doing yoga nidra and guided meditations, and things that were more body based, were more curiosity and connection based, then I really started to see a shift. And so just taking that to the next level of exploration, like try putting emotions on in your body. Like dance is joy, I believe. Whatever it is for you, if you dance in your body, like you're going to create joy in your system. You're going to create whatever you associate with it. So I think we're just really saying how important it is to have an expressive practice. And I think being in community is really helpful. Um, but just, yeah, I think overall we're really sharing like emotions are human. They're, we all have them. Emotions really only last about 90 seconds, but it's how we interact with them and our thoughts in our mind that can magnify or redirect how those emotions are feeling and experiencing over a prolonged period of time. Um, what else do you think we've
I
covered? What
love
else do you
Katie
want?
that you mentioned that, and I also see that Sogol is on, and if she's there to interact, please do, because she and I talk a lot about play. And here's the thing: what you're talking
Mm,
about is that we spend so much time in our heads,
mm,
and we've
yeah.
developed. There's so much of the emphasis on the intellect in our culture, and in what's even rewarded, like the way that the metrics that people use. Now certainly we could talk about the Olympics as being a physical thing, but again, that's not play. That's work. That's taking the body beyond natural playful things. Don't worry, you don't have to come on, but you can text us if you have any questions. It's okay that you're in your pajamas, Sogol.
Yeah.
But the idea of play, of letting the body, I mean, dance is certainly a form of play. Absolutely. It has no purpose except, I mean, at least for ecstatic dance or expressive dance, right? Like you're not following the ballet steps to make sure that your form is exactly right. Um, that you are just experiencing being alive in a different way. And we spend so much time in our
Hmm.
heads thinking about what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do, what do I need to do today, and as opposed to being. And a lot of us are really unprepared to deal with being. We only know how to do. And there's
Hmm.
so much joy in being able to be. And not just, I think many people think of being as sitting in lotus and, meditating and turning the thoughts off.
Empty
And that's
mind.
why,
Yes.
sorry, in the
Yeah,
mind.
I was just empty mind, I was
Yeah,
saying, right? Like
right,
it's
which
just
is
like
really
what?
challenging. But what's
Yeah.
cool is that some of that energy, and actually a lot of it, is in our bodies. And so Sogol says, I was dancing to my Persian music in the car a few hours ago and was crying intermittently. Yeah, because that was a release. It's so
Mm.
beautiful that you gave yourself that opportunity to do that. Yeah, and to let loose what was ever there. And you know what, by doing that, that that emotion has been released. It will not
Hmm.
wreak havoc on you anymore. It will not speak on a cellular level and inhibit your well-being. I mean, that's kind of my whole platform, is living a life of sustainable well-being. And so by
Hmm.
getting curious about our emotions and about how we can navigate them, not just by thinking more, but by releasing, expressing, setting aside time, and elevating their importance. I think that's a huge thing, is that so many people with this whole realm of emotional intelligence that's kind of become in vogue and hip, the reality is that it makes more of an impact on how we feel about our lives than anything else. You can come out of a meeting, and your decision on whether that was a good meeting or bad meeting doesn't have to do with, oh, I presented my slides, or everyone seemed to agree and like my plan, or I got 5 hands up and only 2 hands down, like that was a success. No, we decide whether we feel okay or not okay based on how we feel about it. If
Hmm.
we go to the bathroom, we feel anxious. Are we feeling sweaty armpits because that was exciting and we were jacked up, or was it because it didn't really feel right? And so it's just that tuning in. I'm getting a little off tangent, but I just love our conversations, Katie, and really talking about what's so obviously driving really all of our behaviors in life, and what we go toward and what we go away from is how we do or do not want to feel.
Yeah, and I would just like, offer this experiment to folks with trying to play and accept your emotions for this week. So start to notice, to bring in those elements of observation, curiosity, and expression. And I think that's where things can get challenging. Like, how do I express this emotion? Like, if I don't have the words for it, it's not always having the words for it, right? As we're sharing here, it could be through dance or through music, a combination of both, like allowing yourself to be with yourself through that. And just rather than saying, no, I can't have this emotion right now, just like inviting it out of you so it doesn't get stuck in your body. Um,
I
so
also want to
yeah,
put in a
that's
little,
kind of where I'm at.
and along those lines, Katie, one of the other things that I love to do for a safe way of expressing is expressive writing. And that's something
Mm-hmm.
that I've recently become trained in. And also something I started experiencing because I took classes about 4 years ago in this, when I was trying to really focus on my own healing and emotional expression. And I'm not just talking about journaling, even though there's value in venting and releasing emotion in just writing, free writing with no mind for punctuation or grammar, and certainly not for anyone else to read. But expressive writing with prompts that actually help you sort of take whatever the issue is and guide you in a way that doesn't let you go down a negative path, go into that well you were talking about, but with a formula and a format and a structure to it that helps you actually release the emotion you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about, which is something we can
Mm-hmm.
talk about another time. But there are so many creative ways. This whole idea that creativity is not just art and painting or um, sewing or producing something tangible, but it is a way of expressing who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
What's true for you?
And
What's
I think
original?
for sure, I think a lot of times people, I was stuck in this for a long time, like, I'm not creative. And I laugh about that now. But if you feel that way, I hear you totally. And what's really helpful for me to think back to myself as a kid, right? So I was dancing, I was playing, I was entertaining, I was gathering people around, like I was being silly. I was out in the backyard practicing all of my dance and gymnastics moves. I was super in my body and expressing. I wasn't so much of a sit down and draw or paint or create like that, but it was very much through my body for me. And so I invite you to think back to your child self and what did they like to do? What was their natural state? How did play look like for them? And try one of those things because it's magical. And like you, if you need permission, like you're allowed. Like this is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. Someone sharing, yes, this is one of my limiting thoughts. I can't write. I'm not eloquent with my words. Okay, write, or maybe you speak. Maybe you take videos of yourself. Maybe you like act it out, right? What are the different ways that you can express and share what it is that you want to share? You know, how does it come naturally from you? And it's like writing is a practice too, like sitting down. I think working periods can be really helpful. Um, like noticing what's the thing that's getting in the way. Is it the inability to, okay, then talk. If you talk, then talk.
Yeah, and
Writing might
also, Sogol,
come.
you're very creative with your words. And that's the other thing is, I mean, I can't speak for anyone else in
Talk
the
into your
audience,
phone.
but I really didn't know how to play as a kid. I really
Mm.
didn't. I don't really have a lot of memories of playing. I have a few. I had a dollhouse that I would make things for, and I had little mice living in the dollhouse, not people, and they were mice that were clothes, and I, would put wallpaper on the dollhouse walls, or I'd make furniture out of little pieces of fabric. There were ways that I had those creative times, but I was not. There wasn't a lot of play in my
Mm.
household. There was a lot of focus and decision making and you know structured activity. And so if you didn't have these
Mm.
ways of self-expression that felt safe when you were a child, I know Sogol has a very important platform about healing our inner child. It's really not too late. It's never too late,
Mm-hmm.
because that essence, that part of you is still there, just waiting, just seeking an opportunity to be released.
Yeah, and I'll say like, what are the things you daydream about? What are the things that you wish you could do? Right? Like that might be a place to look. And then just noticing like you can, and you get to choose. I'm curious what you mean returning home to yourself, right? Like that, I kind of see that as like sinking into that alignment and just permission for completely being you, owning and expressing that, discovering that along the way. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I also have folks that ask me, like, how will I know? How will I know when I get there, or when I'm doing that thing? Um, or when I am home, or when I am in alignment with my essence. And it's really like that sense of ease and flow where you feel secure in yourself, and this belief that you'll figure it out. Like Marie Forleo says, everything is figure outable. And that
Mm-hmm.
trust that comes with trusting ourselves, which requires spending time with ourselves, which requires being willing to
Slowing
feel things
down.
we don't want to feel, right? And having a way of processing that, so that we're not dividing life into half positive and half negative, if that's what statistics say, that most of our lives are split up into 50% positive, 50% negative. If you want to tweak that, that's where I really love to get into this idea of there's no real value. Emotions are information, important information about our experience, and they're true and they're not to be denied. And they are letting us know, a negative emotion is letting us know something important and that deserves attention. But like the hot stove, there's no benefit from keeping your hand on the hot stove. The information you receive when you put your hand on the hot stove is, ouch, that's hot. That's telling me something important. But there's no value in just staying in that negative place just to suffer. That
Mm-hmm.
there are tools that you can use, which is what we're talking about, that when you become aware that you're having an emotion or that you're in a mood, that the curiosity you've talked about earlier, Katie, and being able to really think to yourself, how do I want to feel? What is this about? And what can I do that I know will either increase my energy or increase some pleasantness in my life? Or how can I comfort myself in this moment? What's the kindest, most generous way that I can be for myself without denying what's true?
For sure. And I think as we start to wrap up, like something that came up for me as you were sharing is people often ask me, like, how do I feel my feelings? Like, how do I not overlook them? How do I do it? And so a thought for me that came up recently is like, right, okay, you want to be with your emotions. So let's say I'm noticing anger, just like your body is getting hot. You feel the need to like express, but there's nothing to do. It's just like stuck in your body. And so something I like to practice, right? Instead of like going down the well of anger and thinking about all the things you're angry about, and just getting pulled down, right? And you're like weighted with all of these things at the bottom of the well. How do I get out? You're like, okay, the anger is here. All right, what's something I can do? I can breathe, I can slow down. And a practice I like is like 30 seconds of asking yourself questions around that emotion. So, anger, like, what are you here to tell me? Where are you coming from? What do you need right now? How can I support you? How can I take care of you? How can I bring you a little bit more ease? So, whatever set of questions, 4 or 5 questions in that 30 seconds, and then just taking a moment with yourself, right? And then choosing the way forward there. And you can do that with sadness. You can do that with any emotion that comes up for you that's challenging to navigate, and just bringing in that element of curiosity. And then it's like you give yourself that time, you give yourself what you need, or you just stay in that unknown of, I don't really know what I need right now, but I'm going to be curious for 30 seconds. And then I'm going to like go back to doing what I'm doing. I'm going to go back to my work day, or planning this content, or doing this or doing that. And when it comes up again and again, 30 seconds, just asking yourself questions, being with it, noticing, and allowing, right? And just maybe it starts to fade, maybe it starts to go away, but just bringing in that practice of acknowledgement and curiosity, rather than like, oh God, anger's here, go away, go away, go away, right? What you resist persists. So um, I'm curious if you have any final thoughts, applications, takeaways to share.
No, I just we could go on.
I know. I know your audio just cut out though.
There we go. I think my battery just went
Okay,
down.
you're back.
Yeah,
Oh
no,
no.
I loved all of this, and we could just talk till the sun goes down. But I loved it, and to be continued.
Exactly. So thanks everyone. Feel free to share and comment, and you can message us with any further questions. We'll be continuing to do this more likely in a podcast style, but we'll share it here too. Yeah, so someone's saying that breathing has helped a lot and not allowing their feelings to identify who they are. Yeah, exactly. Feelings are just energy. So bringing in that acceptance, I know it's hard, but like maybe you can just practice it for one day, see how it goes. Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. And thank you, Tracy.
Thank you,
And we'll
Katie.
talk to y'all soon. Okay, bye.
Bye bye.